Hello and welcome to my next video, number 3. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ferengi and how they were in Enterprise and also Next Gen and everything else. A lot of people, when we saw the Ferengi in Enterprise, instantly jumped up and down and said, "Oh, you can't do that, that's wrong," and stuff like that. And on the surface of it, it did look rather strange, especially since we didn't know anything about them before the beginning of Next Gen. But there's a couple of things that actually don't follow with that argument. There's a couple of things that actually point to a much greater knowledge before the Next Gen episode where we first saw them than what a lot of people actually think. We can probably discount the little mention of the Ferengi in Encounter at Farpoint by Picard when he's talking to Groppler because that's just, Picard putting a bit of bravado on the table to try and get his own way with Groppler. We can probably discount that. But the actual episode that introduced the Ferengi, The Last Outpost, actually contained a lot more information about the Ferengi than the Federation should have if they know nothing about them, which is what everyone claims. Now, I'm just going to read something which I've copied down studiously off the TV. Bear with me. Captain's log, Stardate 41386.4. We are in pursuit of a starship of Ferengi design. Our mission is to intercept and recover a T9 energy converter, which the Ferengi stole from an unmanned monitor post on Gamma-Tauri 4. A theft which automatic scanners recorded, providing us with the long-awaited opportunity to make close contact with a Ferengi vessel. If we succeed in this chase, it will be Starfleet's first look at a life form which, discounting rumour, we know almost nothing about. Now, that of course is the opening log done by Picard from The Last Outpost. You'll have to forgive my bad Patrick Stewart impersonation. I'm not really even trying, but there you go. Now, that log pretty much tells you that the Federation knows something about the Ferengi. Otherwise, Picard would not have been able to say that we're following a Ferengi vessel. If they didn't know it was a Ferengi vessel, he couldn't have said that. He would have just said an alien vessel. Now, that wouldn't have changed the episode in any way, shape, or form. It still would have been an episode about first contact. It wouldn't have changed anything. But they've specifically said it's a Ferengi vessel. They know it's a Ferengi vessel. They have to know what Ferengi ships look like. So they have to know something about the Ferengi. They obviously have to know a little bit about their technology. Data even says it in the episode that their technology is estimated to be roughly equivalent to the Federation. Federation better in some areas, the Ferengi in others. So they have to know something about the Ferengi before that episode in which they first meet them. Now, we also have in that episode the whole big speech between Data, Riker, and Picard, the Yankee traders speech, where the Ferengi interest in profit is talked about, and Data equates that to the Yankee traders of the 19th century. Now, if the Federation knows bugger all about the Ferengi, how can they know that the Ferengi are interested in profit, that profit is the driving motive of their society? If they know nothing about them, they couldn't. So that speech could never have taken place. That obviously leads us to a very simple conclusion that the Federation does know something about the Ferengi prior to 2364. They may not know everything, that's fair enough. They may have a lot of, half-truths and rumours and lies floating around about them, that they're not quite sure what's what and what's the truth of it all, and they haven't had the opportunity to actually sit down and say, oh, this is a Ferengi and this is what they do and this is how they think and all that sort of stuff. That's fair enough, but they do know quite a bit actually about the Ferengi and their culture, more importantly, and also their technology. Now, they may not know exactly where Ferenginar is, but they can probably pin it down to a region. They obviously know some of the capacities of Ferengi technology. They know that they have warp drive, for instance, so they probably know that they have, subspace communication, subspace sensors, things of that nature, so they can estimate their capabilities. They know that they're driven by profit, so that gives them a bit of a structure. They can look back at, human history and all the other history other worlds that have had profit as an incentive in some of their cultures, and look at some of the things there and make guesstimations of what may and may not be a part of all of Ferengi culture. Now, I probably don't know anything about Ferengi women. That doesn't come till later. But, you know, that simply illustrates how the Federation does know actually quite a bit about the Ferengi. Now, turning to the Enterprise episode. On the surface of it, it does seem a little bit strange that, you know, here we are 200 odd years before the Federation, and we're seeing the Ferengi. Now, before that episode, we actually had an episode where the Ferengi were mentioned. The episode with the planet with the two sentient races. And the doctor on the planet mentioned that they had had a visit from the Ferengi. And, of course, T'Pol didn't know anything about the Ferengi. She didn't know who they were, and Archer obviously didn't either. And, obviously, Earth gets pretty much 99% of its information about alien civilizations from the Vulcans. So if the Vulcans don't know who the Ferengi are, obviously Earth doesn't. That doesn't present a problem. That episode was just a mention. Nothing really came from that. So that doesn't present a problem. Acquisition, on the surface of it, does present a problem. Now, people have quite correctly stated that, you know, just because they don't say that they're the Ferengi in the episode doesn't mean anything. That's quite correct. But all the information, what little there was about the Ferengi, that they gathered during their encounter on Enterprise, would have been obviously sent back to Earth and probably shown to the Vulcans, and the Vulcans would have gone, well, we don't know who they are, but that is interesting. And Earth would have said, well, that's interesting, but we don't know who they are. We'll put this aside and file it away for future reference if we encounter these people again. Now, there wasn't a huge amount in there that really, you know, the ship doesn't necessarily have to have been Ferengi. It could have been bought from any old where. And Enterprise probably didn't get a huge amount of information about it, because no one was probably actively scanning for it at the time. It would have just been, you know, the average normal scan cycles that the ship does routinely. There probably wouldn't have been really any time to sit down and say, well, who are you, why are you here, and what are you doing? It's just like, get the hell off my ship kind of thing. There was the mention of one of them wanting to sell T'Pol to a Bolian slave trader. Now, we don't know that Bolian civilization, which presumably at that time was unknown to Earth, possibly unknown to Vulcan as well, didn't have slavery. Now, we've had slavery in human history, so it's entirely possible that the Bolians had it as well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they did. We don't know that this particular Bolian slave trader hasn't been on Bolius for the last 25 years. You know, he could be a Bolian who is incorruptible kind of person, a sort of, you know, naughty Bolian sort of thing. We know that human beings in Star Trek are acting counter to human culture all the time. We see, you know, crazed scientists and criminals and all sorts of things all the time in Trek. So why can't a Bolian be exactly the same? Of course they can. We don't know that that isn't the case. We don't really care, because it's not really hugely important. So that doesn't present a huge problem. Now, as you go forward, that information was probably sitting at Starfleet headquarters somewhere, just taking up space in a databank somewhere. And every time a new species was encountered, or a new starship or something like that, they probably would have gone back through all the different strange alien encounters that they'd had on all Earth ships over the years, including this one in Acquisition, and compared it and looked at it and tried to figure out, oh, is this the same alien race or is this a different one? Now, most of the time, 90% of the time, it would have been a different one, and it wouldn't have presented any sort of problem that no one really was taking any particular interest in the incident that happened in Acquisition, because it wasn't coming back to be of any great importance. So it just sits there and gathers dust until such times as, you know, sometime in, say, the decade or so before Next Gen started, that you have these rumors coming out about the, you know, capitalistic alien race somewhere off over there in the yonder, doing weird things that nobody quite understands, and they would have looked at it and probably gone, it could be them. These people seem to be interested in profit. Could be them. We'll consider that, but we'll try and gather more information. You don't automatically leap to the conclusion that, oh, this thing that happened, 150 years ago has to be this new alien species out there. For all you know, that alien species that attacked Enterprise all those years ago could have been wiped out. You don't know. There's, plagues and natural disasters and wars going on all over the place. And 150 years is quite a long time for something like that to have happened. You don't know. So something like that could have easily happened. They would have considered it, yes, definitely, but they wouldn't have just jumped on it and said, oh, that has to be them, in my opinion anyway. So I hope from that I've been able to demonstrate that, at least some of those arguments, maybe even more than some, don't actually stack up when you consider what we actually see in that first episode, The Last Outpost, in Next Gen when we first meet the Ferengi. There is actually a heck of a lot more information that the Federation knows about the Ferengi prior to them actually meeting them properly than what everyone just thinks about without stopping to actually look at what they actually did know. And so I think that has to change the way in which we look at things like that episode of Enterprise. Because it comes close to, I don't want to say breaking canon, but it comes close to causing problems, but doesn't actually. It was probably a case of, I think, one of those times where things got ahead of themselves. They wanted to put Ferengi in there in another one of those connection-y type things that I think I talked about last time, with things that were familiar and having the Ferengi, because they had caught on quite well in Deep Space Nine, especially. Quark and Rom and Nog were quite popular characters. So I think that connection to them might have been part of why they did that. But I don't think it presents that much of a problem, really, when you sit down and think and realise, actually, I should say, that the Federation did actually know quite a bit about the Ferengi before they actually encountered them. So I hope that explains my thinking behind that, and I hope that next time I'll talk about something equally interesting to you, if this was interesting to you, which I hope it was, and I'll talk to you then. Goodbye for now.